And suddenly we've lost our monopoly on the creation and distribution of news. Us professional storytellers have lost the monopoly that used to be you had to have a printing press or a satellite dish to tell stories to millions of people. Now all you need is a connection to a social network, a good smartphone, and a bit of connectivity. I started the company Storyful because I believe that we need to find a sustainable business model for quality journalism in the age of the social web.
But I think even the cynics generally have this light bulb moment where they're reporting on their beat and then suddenly out of nowhere they see a tweet or a video or an image that's circulating on social media that starts or defines a story. And they suddenly realize they've got no choice. Like, this is where people are living and people are telling stories. And so their job, and they realize, I think, when they have an example like that, is to jump in, engage, and sort the rumor against the fact, create the context that makes that piece of content really turn into a story.
What would a news agency look like if you didn't have to worry about having thousands of people around the world, if you didn't create any original content, and you just relied on the wisdom in the crowd? If you just relied on sorting the news from all that noise, if you found the storytellers worth listening to, and that was Storyful.
Crowds generally don't work in rational ways, but within every crowd there is a small proportion of people who shape the conversation because they have some stature or authenticity within the community. And so the easiest way to extract news from noise is to find the wisdom in the crowd, not try search for the wisdom of the crowd, because that doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is, if let's say you've got 100 people on Twitter who all they do is talk about Sydney as a location, there's always going to be a few people in that group who really are the people that have respect of the community. And if you find them, they're the people who tell you what trends are developing. They're usually the people who find the news first. They're usually the people who can tell you what's going to define the story as it develops. And that's the key. You can do that by various practical ways, like Twitter lists. You can also do it by watching the velocity of conversations on social media. And also engaging, seek out the people, talk to them. And they may be amateurs, they may be people who have no experience, but they just happen to be respected and trusted. And that's the currency of the social web, is authenticity, not authority. The ethical challenges for me about using what we used to call UGC, we call it eyewitness media now, are massive. And in fact, the biggest failure for the news industry is their failure to confront the ethical issues. So things like credit. There's a study recently shows that only about 16% of television companies credit the individual who created a video, an eyewitness. It's just ridiculous. Let alone compensate them, let alone worry about their protection. You still see people saying credit YouTube as if like credit telephone. It's ridiculous. So we at Storyful take this very seriously. We've actually just provided seed funding to an initiative to examine all of the ethical issues around the use of eyewitness media. And we're appealing to all the big news organizations to join with us, to pledge money. We're funding essentially 2 researchers who have experience in this area, and we're hoping that this will become, over the coming months, something that everyone will rally around, because we need some serious rules of the road when it comes to using eyewitness media that protect our ability to spread the news, but also respect the fact that these pieces of content are not just randomly put up on the web, they're created by people who have a story to tell, and we have an obligation to them.
From my experience working with all the biggest newsrooms in the world and some of the smaller ones, that we should think about small, incremental changes. Like, think about the idea, if you took some element of your newsroom or some part of your platform and just created a ring fence and gave a few people the ability to try things and fail, and learn a lesson and try again and get better. Small incremental steps.
So I've seen, for example, the rise of these user-generated content units. The BBC, CNN pioneered the way. The first wave weren't that effective because they relied on people to send videos or send images to the newsroom, and people don't do it that way. They see something interesting, they put it up wherever their friends are, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. The next wave I think I've seen is The Guardian has the Witness app, which is kind of a community of selecting citizen journalists who actually are motivated to go out and use the app to share content. So that's a good example. I think another interesting way is to not just have a social media editor, but is to teach everybody in your newsroom social news gathering skills. That's one thing you could do tomorrow, is just give some basics, how to use TweetDeck, how to build a Twitter list, how to communicate with people on Instagram or on YouTube. So there's just a lot of literacy that I would start with. And the next thing I would look at is can you pick one single metric, whether it be views on your site, and just see a 10%, 20% change by having more social content. So it's small victories like that. You've got to go to the bean counters and the business development executives and say, hey, there's a practical example of something that changed. It's not a massive revolutionary change, but imagine if we could scale that. So I think, thinking in terms of small victories is the way to win the war.
This next generation will laugh when we tell them that we used to sit down at 9 o'clock and turn on the television in the front room and wait for the journalists to come and tell us the news. They will laugh when we say at an appointed time we used to buy a newspaper and read it on the train. But what they will want, and this is not going to change, is somebody they can look to trust. Somebody who tells them this is a story worth telling.